Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, the really fascinating and complex economic story of Iran, its history, its future.
It's definitely misunderstood a lot of the time.
Exactly. So we've gathered quite a bit, historical accounts, economic analyses, geopolitical takes to, pull out the key insights for you.
And we're really going to try and connect the dots today, show how decisions made way back and Iran's unique structures have shaped where the economy is now.
Right, understanding the why, not just the
Why, precisely, why it matters.
Okay, so let's get into it. We're starting, maybe surprisingly, back in the interwar period. Iran had this burst of industrial ambition.
Yeah, it's actually quite striking. Between about 1925 and 1941, there was this huge push. They went from fewer than 20 modern industrial plants to over 800 new ones.
Wow, 800. How did that happen so fast?
Well, the state was heavily involved. They raised tariffs, poured money into new industries, set up government monopolies.
It's a real top-down effort.
Very much so. And they changed legal, tax, trade policies, which brought in new entrepreneurs. But, and this is really interesting, the Shah's court became the biggest investor.
It's the court itself.
Yes. And the Shah himself ended up becoming the richest man in the country, mostly by confiscating land, real estate.
That's quite a detail. But this growth, this big push, it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? What were the downsides?
No, absolutely not. It was, well, fundamentally imbalanced. The different sectors weren't really integrated.
Okay.
So these new industries, they only met part of the growing demand. And crucially, agriculture, which supported, 90% of the workforce, then it just didn't benefit.
90%. And they were left out.
Pretty much. These modern sectors like fisheries, railroads, the early oil industry, they absorbed less than 4% of the labor force, maybe 170,000 workers total. So a huge disconnect.
Okay, fast forward a bit. After World War II, oil really starts to take center stage, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's when it becomes the story. You had Prime Minister Mossadegh nationalizing the oil industry in 51.
A huge move.
Huge, but it led to a UK oil embargo, and then, the UK and US backed the coup against him in 53.
Right.
So after that, from 54 to 60, oil money starts flowing in, along with Western aid. And you get this rapid economic growth, but it's mostly in the government sector.
And that caused problems.
Yeah, familiar ones. Rising inflation, the currency lost value, a trade deficit by 61. Later, in the late 60s, early 70s, development plans opened things up more to imports, foreign investment.
And that helped the middle class grow.
It did, yeah. And then the 73 oil price spike just poured fuel on the fire. More industrialization, more consumption. Banks invested heavily in manufacturing.
And the military, too, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. The military got a huge slice of that growing pie, a major part of the budget.
Then comes 1979. The revolution, followed by the Iran-Iraq War.
Yeah.
That must have been a seismic shift for the economy.
Immense. Absolutely monumental. After the 79 nationalizations and then the war breaking out, over 80% of the economy ended up under government control.
80%.
And the war itself, the cost was just staggering. Estimated $500 billion. And the human cost, at least 300,000 Iranians killed, over 500,000 injured. Just devastating.
The scale is hard to comprehend. So with the state controlling so much after 79, how did that change where the real economic power lies? Who actually controls the wealth?
Right. This is where it gets really unique to Iran. So the Constitution, Article 44, it talks about state, cooperative, and private sectors. Sounds standard enough.
Okay.
But the reality on the ground is dominated by these, unique, powerful, often very opaque organizations. First, you've got the Bonyads.
Religious foundations?
Exactly. Large religious foundations. It's like a network of over 120 organizations, and they control something like 20% of Iran's GDP, maybe more.
20%. And they're tax exempt.
Largely, yes. And they answer directly to the supreme leader. They run everything, huge farms, hotels, car factories, you name it.
But are they efficient?
Well, the common view is that they're often overstaffed, sometimes corrupt, and not very profitable. And here's the kicker. They aren't subject to audit or Iran's normal accounting laws.
Not subject to audit. How does that even work?
It means they operate outside the usual financial scrutiny, and that creates, massively unfair competition for any genuine private businesses trying to get ahead.
Right. It fundamentally rigs the system.
It absolutely does. It distorts competition, stifles innovation. The lines between state, business, personal gain just get completely blurred.
And the Bonyads aren't the only players like this, are they?
No. Then you have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. They have huge economic influence, too.
In what areas?
Well, they reportedly have a near monopoly on smuggling, which costs legitimate Iranian companies billions. But they're also heavily involved in telecoms, even laser eye surgery clinics, apparently, car manufacturing, big construction projects, oil and gas.
Wow, so a military organization deeply embedded in the economy.
Deeply. It leads to this incredible concentration of wealth. You might remember former President Ahmadinejad once said something like, 60% of Iran's wealth is controlled by just 300 people.
It's staggering. 300 people. It paints such a picture of concentration. But you also mentioned earlier the middle class actually doubled after the revolution. How do those two things fit together?
Yeah, it seems contradictory, doesn't it? But it's true. While you had this intense concentration at the very top, there were social shifts, too. The middle class grew from maybe 15% in '79 to over 32% by 2000.
So some benefited, but inequality remained.
Exactly. Huge inequality persists even within the public sector.
Yeah.
You have state employees making as little as, say, $200 a month.
$200.
Yeah. And then you contrast that with reports of some Majlis members, the parliamentarians, getting over $59,000 a month, plus bonuses for holidays and things like Parliament Day.
That's an incredible disparity. Okay, let's shift to right now, the last few years leading to 2024, 2025. Sanctions have been a major factor. How are they hitting?
Well, look, the sanctions haven't caused a total collapse.
Huh.
Iran actually managed some growth, about 1.7% on average since the big 2012 shock, and more recently saw a bit of a rebound.
So not a collapse, but
But for ordinary Iranians, it's what you might call a Pyrrhic victory. You know, the cost is just immense. Living standards just aren't rising anymore. They're falling for many.
how does that translate day to day?
Well, inflation has been running incredibly high, over 42% in 2022 and early 24. The forecast for 2025 is still near 30%.
42%.
And the currency, the round, it's just been hammered, lost over half its value in 3 years. It went from 550,000 to the dollar in Sep 24 to $1 million by March 25.
$1 million relative to the dollar. That's
Okay.
that's hyperinflation territory, isn't it?
It's getting dangerously close for many goods. And oil exports, vital revenue, they tanked from 2.5 million barrels a day in 2017 down to less than 0.4 million in 2020. They've recovered somewhat, but nowhere near pre-sanction levels consistently.
And who feels this pain the most?
That's the crucial point. The analysis suggests the pain of sanctions will be felt by the Iranian middle class rather than the elite.
Why is that? How do the elite avoid it?
Well, they often have access to foreign currency, ways to move money, connections. It disproportionately hits the middle class, people on fixed incomes, small business owners. It erodes their standard of living
You
dramatically.
hear about the Akhwazadeh, right?
No.
The children of the elite.
Exactly. That phenomenon, you even see things like the Rich Kids of Tehran website flashing wealth. It's a stark contrast to the struggles most people face. The labor market is also dire, especially for young, educated Iranians.
How bad is unemployment?
It's high. Roughly a third of men under 30 with college degrees are unemployed. For women in the same group, it's about half.
Half of young educated women are unemployed.
Yeah. And this is while, 20,000 people start PhD programs every year, competing for maybe 4,000 or 5,000 actual jobs requiring that level of education.
That's unsustainable.
Totally. And then you have these exchange rate policies. They're controversial because they seem to drain public money while enriching certain elites.
How does that work?
Well, some estimate that middlemen pocketed maybe $30 billion by getting dollars at the cheap official rate, supposedly, for importing essential goods and then selling those goods, or maybe even just the dollars, at the much higher free market rate.
$30 billion
Yeah.
just siphoned off.
That's the estimate. It fuels corruption and drains resources.
And the last year or so, mid-2024 into early 2025, seems to have brought even more instability.
It really has. You had the mysterious helicopter crash in May 2024 that killed President Raisi and the foreign minister.
Right. Officially bad weather, but lots of speculation.
Exactly. And that happened alongside this deepening economic crisis. The rial hitting $1 million to the dollar by March 25 was a major psychological blow.
And energy shortages, too.
Severe energy shortages, widespread power cuts, blackouts across the country in the fall and winter of 24-25. This stuff really hits home.
To the point where it could affect stability.
Potentially. I mean, if essential goods keep getting more expensive, approaching hyperinflation, even security forces, loyalist groups on fixed incomes, their loyalty could start to waver. It's a fragile situation.
So Looking ahead, given all these huge challenges, what's Iran's plan? How do they see a way forward?
Well, they have this official 20-year vision plan. The goals are, reduce reliance on oil, get sustainable growth, improve social welfare, boost science and tech.
Standard goals, but achievable. What about the oil dependence?
That's a big hurdle. Maintaining oil export profits after 2025 is tough. Their fields have like an average 6% annual decline rate. They need new tech for extraction, but bureaucracy gets in the way.
So oil is a declining asset without major investment.
Potentially, yes. But there is hope in non-oil sectors. Manufacturing, industrial areas have seen a surge. E-commerce is growing fast, projected to hit over $2.3 billion by 2029. So diversification is happening to some extent.
That raises the question of geopolitics. How does Iran's foreign policy, its desire for regional power, connect with its economic path?
Oh, they're deeply connected. Iran's foreign policy is often described as, well, pragmatic underneath the rhetoric. They want to survive, maintain sovereignty, and be seen as a major regional power.
The art of saying the opposite of what it does.
Exactly. You hear that phrase a lot. They pursue their interests strategically. The nuclear program, for instance, is seen as key to their future power, their assertiveness.
But it also has economic dimensions.
Absolutely. It's a bargaining chip, potentially unlocks sanctions relief, but it's also used internally to, whip up nationalist sentiment, that whole rally around the flag effect when there's domestic pressure or uncertainty.
So the drive for power and the economic realities are constantly interacting.
Constantly intertwined, yes. It makes the whole picture incredibly complex.
It really does. As we pull back from this deep dive, it's clear Iran's economy isn't just one thing. It's this mix of history, these really unique power structures like the Bonyads and IRGC, and then the real everyday struggles people face under sanctions and mismanagement.
It shows incredible resilience in some ways, but also highlights the massive impact of both internal choices and external pressures.
Definitely.
And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? You have this immense internal wealth controlled by these powerful, often opaque groups. And then you have the clear struggles of ordinary Iranians. What kind of fundamental change, in who owns what and who governs what would actually shift the economic fortunes for the majority?
That is a really powerful question to think about. What would it actually take? A compelling thought indeed. Until next time, keep digging deeper.